Hi, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast. You are listening to episode 139. And yes, this is part 5, actually part 5 of a 5-part series that we've been doing on the podcast called 5 Signs That You Are Under the Influence. Guys, how are you? How are you? This is a treat to be back with you. I've been off a couple of weeks. My wife and I actually have been traveling. We left right after Christmas, and we're traveling the country. We took an airplane and we went to the East Coast and visited a bunch of states and just had a great time. And it was fantastic. But I obviously took a couple of weeks off here from my coaching work and also from this podcast. So if you're a regular listener of the podcast, you probably have noticed that there hasn't been an episode posted for a couple of weeks. That's because I was taking some time off, but it's really good to be back here, and I'm happy to be wrapping up this series. I hope you've enjoyed this series we've been doing. We've been doing actually going through the series of which is 5 signs that you are under the influence. And the gist of this series is that we are all under the influence. We're all operating under the influence of something, either our egoic nature, our egoic persona, or our what I would call our true divine highest self. So when we're operating under our truest, highest divine self, there are signs that will indicate or show us that we're operating under divine source energy. Okay. And that's what we've been talking about the last 5 episodes. So in this episode today, we're going to cover the 5th sign. You don't want to miss it. It is a game changer. But before I do that, I just want to say Happy New Year. We are in a brand new year, 2021. Maybe, right? Possibly. I'll explain that in a minute. But I also, before we get into the meat of this episode, I have a couple of just really, really fantastic announcements to share with you. First of all, I just want to tell you, I just want to tell you that I know, I live in California, Southern California, my wife and I do. And I don't know which part of the country you're living in or where you're at in the world, but in the West Coast of the United States, things are pretty locked down. You can't eat in a restaurant. You can't, everybody's on high alert with the virus. And again, there's no judgment there, but life is just very uptight. There's an energy here, and you kind of get used to it. You really don't think anything of it. But then my wife and I, we right after Christmas, we got on a plane and we flew to we flew into Georgia, and then we spent some time in Tennessee, and then we went up to Ohio, which is where my family lives. I have a daughter, and her beautiful my beautiful grandbabies, her babies live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then I have a family where I'm born and raised. My mom and dad and brother live in Columbus, Ohio. So I get to visit them. And then, my wife and I, we traveled to Virginia and then also South Carolina for just a getaway, just a nice little vacation. And I can tell you, I just want to say that, hey, first of all, we're alive and well. We're not sick. We didn't get sick. I know everybody gets a little uptight, and we're told that we can't travel and we have to be locked down. But I just want you to know that you can do whatever you want to do. And I don't say that in a kind of a brash way or kind of like, screw everybody. I'm just saying that traveling is a value that I have, and it's a value. It's something I take very seriously. Freedom is really important to me. And I don't mean freedom in a way I know some people may hear that and say, I just don't care about any other people and I just do what I want. I don't mean that kind of freedom, but I value physical interaction with people. I value being in people's presence, and I value travel. And so we've been told all year that we're not able to do these things. But I just want to give you a new perspective. I don't agree with that. I actually think we can do that if you choose to do that. Now, if you choose not to travel, if you choose to not interact with people because of concerns about the virus, I respect that. I totally respect that. But I have a very different value system. And I could go into detail as to why, but that'd be a whole other conversation. But I just want you to know that it was refreshing for my wife and I to get on a plane and to travel to the south and to the east coast. And we got to eat in restaurants. And we can't eat in restaurants here in California, but we got to eat in restaurants. And let me just say what a gift that is, to just be around people and to be conducting just daily life, just like living, And I got to visit my dad. My dad is 84 years old. He's had the coronavirus. He has recovered well, and we got to see him right after that, and it was such a gift. Of course, he was worried about us getting the virus and all that kind of thing. But I just, that was not a concern that we had. And so it was such a gift to be able to sit with my dad, sit in his presence, no fear, no concern. And I was able to give him a nice massage. It was fantastic. I was able to give him a great massage and just defy, not in the spirit of just like defying, but really to cut through. I don't, maybe defy is not the right word. Transcend all the fear that people have, okay? Because this is not natural fear, nor is it sustainable. Living life is about, first of all, it's about, if you give your life away because you're afraid to die, it kind of defeats the purpose. I always like to say, if you sell the car for gas money, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So at some point, it's good to just ask ourselves, like, what is it that we are doing with our life? And what is it that we're passionate about? And, my mom is, she's been in a facility. She's been in a rehab facility for elderly people, and she has been there since April with no visitors, like 0 visitors. And I know there's a lot of elderly people who are stuck in these facilities and they're just not getting, they have no contact with the outside world. And I've talked with folks who work in those facilities, and I get it. They're, out of precaution and out of abundance of concern, they want to protect people. They want to protect folks from getting sick. But if you just give your life away, a lot of and so people who have been working in these facilities and these retirement facilities and nursing homes, they're saying that a lot of these elderly folks are dying, but they're not dying from any virus. They're just declining. Their health is just, their body, they're just giving up on life because they're cut off from just what I would call humane decency, humane contact, just being able to see people face to face and interact with them. I know there's a risk, but again, at what point do you give your life away to stay alive? Do you see what I'm saying here? It's like at what point do we sell the car in the name of getting gas money? Does this make sense? Like, there's a balance here. My mom has been in a facility since April. She hasn't even seen her husband, who she's been married to over 40 years, and hasn't seen any relatives. We came up there. My brother and I and my wife, we ended up going to the facility where my mom is, and we literally walked around to her room and stood outside of her window. She was on a second floor, and we stood on the ground and waved to her. And it was a very surreal thing to see somebody locked, and I'm, locked in a room, basically can't have access to the outside world. Just, it was just interesting. And I say all that it was worth the trip for my wife and I to travel from California all the way out east, and then to visit my dad in person, him being 84. And it's just, I say all that to say that it's time to really think about where we're headed as a society, where we're headed as a people, as a culture, as a group. Anyway, those are just some thoughts I wanted to share about our travels. Anyway, it was a real gift to have the freedom to travel and to travel without any concern or fear. And we're just fine. I wanted to tell you about it because this year, I know there's a lot of narratives going around, but I want you to really check in with your being, with yourself, and just know that you have a lot more options than maybe you think you do. Okay. You have a lot more options than you may think you do. Okay. So with that said, another announcement. I'm super excited. Okay, this one I've been waiting to tell you for a while. Okay, I want to introduce to you something completely brand new. And if you know me, you know I love to have conversations and dialogue with the listeners of the Lovecast. I really enjoy it. I love getting emails from people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world that listen to this podcast. And I love the dialogue. I love to hear, just how things are progressing in your life, how the podcast is benefiting you. Well, I have created and introduced something completely new to this podcast that is going to allow greater interaction with the listeners. Okay. This podcast, The Lovecast with Jamal, now has its own exclusive hotline. Yes. I was a part of another podcast that my publisher put on with a couple of other authors. And we used to pride ourselves because we had a hotline there, and listeners of the show would be able to call in and leave their questions and their comments and their even disagreements. And anyway, I am happy to tell you that this podcast, The Lovecast with Jamal, now has its own hotline. And I want to invite you, yes, you, if you're listening to this podcast, I want to invite you to tune in and to write down this phone number, okay? Because here's the phone number. You ready for it? Here is the phone number to the hotline, okay? It's 909-747-9648. Again, the hotline, the number to the Lovecast with Jamal podcast hotline is 909-747-9648. I want to invite you. You can send a text. You can text that hotline. If you send a text to that number, 909-747-9648, I'll get it. And I would invite you to send a text or even leave a voicemail. That would be even better. I would love to hear your voice. You guys have incredible. It's amazing when I finally do get to talk to people in person or hear the voice of the people who listen to this podcast as opposed to just hearing my voice. I love to hear your voice. So let me invite you to call. You can call this number, 909-747-9648, and you can leave a voicemail. And if you would like, I can play your voicemail on the podcast show, but let me invite you to leave a voicemail or to send a text, whatever you would prefer. Text, voicemail, both are welcomed. But let me know your thoughts. It's just a great way for you to reach out. Maybe you just want to introduce yourself. That's great. Just shoot me a quick message. Tell me how, where you're listening from, what you're getting out of the podcast, and any questions or comments, or even disagreements or pushbacks, anything you'd like for me to clarify. That's what the hotline is there for. It's just to invite more interaction and a greater level of interaction with the listeners. So if you're listening to this, write this number down, 909-747-9648. Send a text or even leave a voicemail to the hotline. And I would love that. Okay. Let me invite you to do that. Don't skip over this. This is something I've been really excited about. Okay. All right. With that said, let's get into the meat of today's episode. Okay. So we are talking about, this is part 5. This is the 5th sign that you are under the influence. And I would say under the influence of divine source energy. Okay. You ready for it? You want to write this down. This is the 5th sign that you are operating under the influence of divine source energy. Here it is. Your imagination of the future feels as limitless and hopeful as the present does. Yeah, let me say that again. When we are operating under divine source energy, our imagination of the future, when we think about the future, it feels very limitless and hopeful, just like we feel in the present. Now, I will say this. Let me just say this about the present moment. If you're truly in the present moment, if you're really and truly living in the present moment, you will feel abundant. You'll feel at rest. You will feel peaceful. It'll feel very blissful, like you actually have no problems in the world. Now, I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, well, so you're saying if I'm present, I don't have any problems. I'm just saying that in the present moment, everything you need Literally everything you need it exists already right here, right now. You have this sense of abundance. You have this sense that you're being taken care of, that you're being provided for, that that is there. It's in the present moment. Now, the reason we don't feel that in the present moment is because we're actually not living in the present. We're living in the past. We're totally living in the past. And when we live in the past, guess what we do? Yeah, we're blind. We're blind to the present. And then we start to think about the future. Yeah, when you live in the past, you start to think about the future because the future seems pretty scary. Seems pretty scary because really what the ego or the egoic nature or that part of our conditioned self, all we know is what we've experienced. That's all we know is what we've experienced in the past. So it's natural that when we think about the future, we think about the future through the lens of the past. But whenever we do that, we feel fearful and anxious. The future seems bleak because the past has seemed bleak. Again, that's what we're doing. And people get in these loops. It's kind of like this destructive loop where we've experienced trauma and hardship in the past. And then when we think about the future, we're thinking about the past repeating itself, and then therefore it does. Okay? That's when we're operating under the influence of our egoic nature, which is just simply a collection of our own past experiences, our own past belief systems. Okay? That's what dictates typically how we feel when we think about the future. But when you're operating from divine source energy, you're no longer just drawing from the past, your past experiences. No, you're actually drawing from a completely different, I would say, dimension, a completely different realm. It's the realm of possibility. It's the realm of what could be. Okay, but this is a really important point I want to just emphasize for us because failure to understand this is why problems and trauma and injustice and all these things tend to repeat in patterns. Okay, and this is true both individually and also collectively. This is why history tends to repeat itself over and over and over because our reference point is often the past. That's because when we're living, under the influence of the egoic nature or under the influence of egoic energy, our reference point is always the past. Yeah. But when we're living under divine source energy, now our reference point isn't the past, it's actually the future. So our present feels very hopeful, okay? Because when we're operating under our future, under the influence of our divine source nature, our projection of the future feels as abundant as the present does. Okay. So I did a little post recently that I kind of explained this, and I'll read it to you. This is kind of my thoughts about this, that it really expresses this, but here's what I said in a recent social media post. I said, the reason past injustices keep repeating for us, both personally and collectively, is because the past remains our primary reference point. Every time we react to past injustice using shame and blame, we are actually bringing the past energy of injustice into the present. When we bring the energy of the past into the present, the past we despise keeps repeating itself. This is the essence of perpetual victimhood. There is a better way for you personally and for us as a society. To end injustice, powerlessness, and perpetual victimhood, both personally and collectively, we need a reference point from the future, not the past. Let me repeat that again. If we're going to end injustice, powerlessness, and perpetual victimhood, both personally and collectively, we really need a reference point from the future, not the past. When we visualize and have a dream of holistic justice, and you could put anything in there, holistic health, holistic abundance, whatever you want to say. When we visualize and have a dream of holistic justice and hold that as our new reference point, We bring the energetic future we all desire right into the present. So let's drop shame and blame and pick a new reference point for our life today. Okay. So the idea of that is there is a future, and that future exists not from our past, but it exists in the realm, the dimension of pure love, a pure infinite possibility. I would call that divine source energy. And there is a future that we can tap into and get a glimpse of. I truly believe this, and I've seen it in my own life. I have a vision of myself from the past, which is always seems and feels very limiting, very powerless, and maybe even filled with injustice from all forms of perceived, injustices that have happened to me. But when I think about my future, the future according to my desires, the future of what is possible for me, that's actually that future me, that future you actually exists already in a realm. And when we get a glimpse of that from this other dimension, okay, you can feel it. It feels powerful. It feels, it's a game changer. And then what we do is we bring that energy of the future into the present, okay? Or when we're operating from the present, when we've healed from the past, when we're able to process and clear past traumatic energy, then we're able to get very present. And in the present, like I said, the present is filled with abundance, with power, with peace, all the things that we have longed for. It actually can be found here in the present. And then when we think about the future, that gives us access to think about the future from that place. And when we think about the future from the place of peace, from the place of abundance, from the place of rest, oh, the future looks beautiful. The future is nothing to be afraid of. Actually, the future is something that we're just excited to allow to unfold. Okay, yeah. So that's how you know when you're operating under the influence of divine source energy. Your imagination of the future feels as limitless and hopeful as the present does. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Yeah, it's a game changer. It's truly, truly a game changer. It's one of the reasons, and today I'm recording this podcast on Martin Luther King Jr., the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, national holiday. And you know what's incredible about Martin Luther King Jr., and one of the reasons I really believe that his message was so powerful and so effective for our culture is because he did not approach the civil rights movement from the energy of the past. No, I mean, he didn't ignore it, and he didn't sugarcoat it, and he didn't suppress it. He acknowledged that there was just a long history of grave injustices, of course. But Martin Luther King Jr.'s message was literally colored by a vision of the future. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right? Who has not, if you're an American, if you live here in the United States, and even if you've lived internationally overseas, who has not heard of the I Have a Dream speech? Have you heard that speech? I have a dream. Think about that for a moment. Where did he get that? Remember that speech, I have a dream? And he had this vision of all the races and people's, different, no matter if you're male or female or what ethnicity you were, he had a vision of people being able to live together in harmony, in love, in unity. Where did he get that? Did he get it from the past? No, not at all. Not at all. He had to actually access that vision from another dimension. And right before he passed away, right before he was killed, he even drew reference to it. He said, I may not get there with you. I may not in this dimension. He goes, I may not actually get to the promised land there with you. He said, but I've been there. I've been to the top of the mountain. He goes, and I've seen the promised land. I've seen the other side. It's profound what he's saying. Can you hear it? He's saying, I saw it. He got a vision of the future. And that became his reference point for the present, for his life in the present. Can you hear that? Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to tell you today that no matter where you are right now, what you're experiencing, that you can draw from the future. You can tap into the future. For you personally, you can tap into your future realm, your future dimension. You can get a glimpse of yourself from the future, your highest and truest, most divine self. And you can begin to get to know that person, to get a vision of that person. And you can begin to import that energy, that life essence into your present tense reality. When you do that, that's when everything changes. That's a game changer. That's when your life starts to take off. And again, that's what I do in coaching when I work with clients. I mean, that's ultimately what we're learning, how to clear the past, to reconcile the past, to clear that old energy out. We learn how to get very present to ourself. We learn how to awaken to our highest self, and then we learn to get a vision of ourself from a completely different dimension. And then we pull that energy into the present and begin to create our life from that place. And that is when patterns, limiting patterns of suffering, just things we have not been able to get over, that's when you start to see those cycles just break and shift. Putting more spiritual words to it, I really believe this is the heart of what Jesus meant when he said, "Let your kingdom come and let your will be done on the earth as it is in heaven." So the question is, where is heaven? Yeah. Where is that? Yeah, it's a whole other dimension, but that dimension is in you. The kingdom of heaven, as Jesus said, is within you. So it's learning how to access that dimension within us, which is also, we may consider that a future dimension, a dimension that has yet to unfold in space and time. And we begin to operate from that energy and create our present from that place. So when we think of the future, it feels limitless and hopeful, just like it does in the present. This is how you know you're operating under divine source energy. So I know that can be kind of metaphysical and can be a little bit heady, but I wanted to share that with you. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Dwell on that a little bit. Just want to encourage you that there is a future you. There is a future you that is smiling at the present you, that is filled with pride and love at the thought of your journey. And you can access that future you, that divine you is one with you, is in you. You have access to this one. Yes. And so let me encourage us all today to begin to move within, to tap into that true powerless or limitless and powerful essence. Let me encourage us to tap into that person and let's start really living, because you can't really truly live in a fearless, powerful, limitless way until we start tapping into that future self. Okay. If you'd like some more information about how to do that, I mean, obviously that's part of what the coaching process is about. Just shoot me an email, jamal@jamaljavanji.com. Love to hear your journey and maybe ways I could be of assistance to you or point you in that direction at least. So reach out to me. Also, now that you have the number to the hotline, you can also reach out to me that way. 909-747-9648 is the number to the Lovecast with Jamal podcast hotline. Send me a text or leave a voicemail. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, guys, take care. Bye-bye.